Each candidate again will have 1 minute to offer an opening statement. They will then respond in turn to questions provided by the League of Women Voters, this evening's partners, and then by you, the audience. You will have 1 minute each to answer the questions. If you wish to make a rebuttal, hold up your green rebuttal sign. You will have 30 seconds to make a rebuttal after each of you have answered one particular question, and you have a total of 3 rebuttals for the evening. I would like to remind the audience to remain quiet during the forum and make sure that your electronic devices are turned off. And we will begin now with opening statements, beginning with Mr. Gallus.
Good evening, and thank you all for coming out tonight, and the League of Women Voters for holding this forum. For the past 4 years, I have attended over 90% of the school board meetings and special sessions. What a better way to see what's going on in the district. What a better way to see how our elected officials are performing their duties, seeing firsthand what is working well and what needs improvement. Too often over the last 4 years have the hard-hitting questions not been asked when it comes to educational programs. What is the true cost of ownership to this district? How will it benefit all students in this district, and how are we going to measure the success of each one of those programs? I believe before implementing any new programs, these important questions should have answers. Our district can no longer simply afford new net additions to the workloads of teachers and to the cost of the district. We have to start looking at the total cost of ownership in any new programs before we jump in. We need to have actionable and measurable goals regarding our educational programs. Otherwise, we will not know what we need to improve upon. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to remind you to cozy up to the mic a little better. Mr. Sullivan.
Hi, my name is Max Sullivan. I'd like to first thank the League of Women Voters, co-sponsors, and the guests and other candidates for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I have lived in this area for about 10 years now. I've made it my home, and I expect it to stay my home. Why am I running for the school board? Because I think we are in transition, nationally, statewide, and locally. And there's nothing I can think of that's more important than our kids. I have a grandson that will come up through this system, and I expect more than one grandson. So I want to do the best I can for you, the public, so that we can get the best kids trained possible. Thank you.
Ms. Seelinger.
Good evening. My name is Deborah Seelinger. I'm running for Rochester Public School Board because I believe in creating quality public education for all our children. I believe this is attainable and sustainable. We can achieve this goal with strong district leadership and community support. We need to foster clear communication between the district, our families, school leadership, and our citizens. We need to frame our decision-making by asking, is it good for the students? Is it good for the staff? And is it good for our community? We need to bring financial and human resources into alignment with the aims and goals of the district. I bring a unique depth and breadth of experience to the table. I hold a master's degree in adult education. I am a school volunteer working in the buildings. I'm a PTSA leader working with parents. I've served on district level committees, and I've worked at community nonprofits. Thank you for being here this evening, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, candidates. Our first question will come from the League of Women Voters. We'll start with Mr. Sullivan with this question. Again, for the 2010-2011 school year, there were 314 children who met the definition of homeless in those county schools. In addition to 109 who were sheltered, there were 182 who were doubled up with friends and family, and 23 staying in a motel or a hotel. Of the 314 children identified as homeless in Rochester County Public Schools last year, 8 are pre-kindergarten, 220 are in elementary schools, and 86 are in secondary schools. What can the schools and county do together to address the special needs of these children?
I think it's very important for the school district to educate all its people. no matter where they come from, no matter what their economic situation is, it's our responsibility to see that they are given the tools that they need to move forward in their educational experience. As far as special needs that they may have, I think it would be to our best interest to work with the human resources people or whatever agencies are involved in maintaining their existence. And we can definitely work with them and keep the channels open.
Thank you. Mr. Gallus?
Part of the school district's responsibility is to educate students. We also have a number of policies in place and programs in place to identify at-risk students. Primarily starts in early childhood, but we also have programs in place today to address some of those family and individual needs that we work hand in hand with the county with.
Thank you. Ms. Sandberg?
We've heard recently about the ALC Center and how that some of their population is homeless. It's quite heartbreaking to hear that we have even younger children in a homeless situation. I believe that the schools need to do everything they can while the students are in their care during the day, focusing on their education. But I believe that we have great potential to work with Olmsted County, our public health nurses, and other agencies to help meet the needs of some of these families and students outside our regular school day.
Thank you. Our next question comes from the Post Bulletin, and we'll begin with Ms. Steelinger.
The Rochester School Board is considering a technology plan that would cost $7 million that would equip many students with iPad tablets. Proponents say it would be a powerful tool to engage students in their education. There are critics who are very skeptical and say that it's just an expensive boondoggle and there's a lack of local data to prove its effectiveness. If you were on board, would you vote for the plan?
Well, my disclaimer would be that I have an iPad, my husband has an iPad, and all 3 of my 80-year-old in-laws have iPads. My son at Churchill Hoover Elementary, they have a small pilot program of iPads, and he's been using them in his music classroom, learning keyboard skills. I was also part of a group of district staff and administration, and I went with one other parent up to the cities to see the one-on-one technology in use in 2 different buildings. I believe there's great potential in this technology. I think that it has some tremendous results to be determined, especially in terms of differentiation for learning with our students, either our high achievers or struggling students. I believe that the school board is going to be discussing this next week in a study session some more. I'm interested to see where they will go with it, and well, I'm sure we'll talk about it more.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
As far as the plan stands today, no, I would not be in favor of it. I'm a definite proponent of technology. I think technology is a wave of the future and has been for a very long time. We need to progress forward, but we also need to understand a couple of things. First of all, it's not the responsibility of the school system and people that lived on fixed income to provide iPads for people who can well afford them. And I think that's a primary interest of mine. Second of all, technology keeps changing. This is out of date today, not tomorrow, today. They already have plans to come out with another iPad in this September. So what are we going to do when we spend all this money on these iPads and then find out they're out of date? We're not going to spend another $7 million next year. So we need to take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gallus?
The way the question was asked, no. I am not in favor of the current plan that the superintendent and his staff has brought forward. Primarily because the plan does not have any actual and accountable measurements put in place on how we're going to measure the success of this program. Nor does it take into account the fact that, oh, by the way, if nobody had paid attention, in the next 3 years, we're going to be $30 million in the hole. We're going to implement a new technology plan without a total cost of ownership. I'm going to give you a quick example. One book on an iPad. If the full program was implemented at 16,000 iPads, would cost this district in 3 years $240,000. We don't have that kind of money. I work for a major technology company in this town. I understand the value of technology. But in our business, if you can't pay for it and you can't measure it, you can't have it.
Thank you. Our next question comes from the, oh, I'm sorry, there's a rebuttal.
I think this is a complicated issue, and we're not just talking about iPads as an educational tool, we're talking about iPads as a technology. My students go to school and they walk down the hall and they get to the computer lab. And they take the time out of their day to get there and come back. Now, if we had iPads as a classroom set, maybe mobile, that would be efficiency. And I think some of these iPads would probably be replacing some of the outdated desktops and laptops we have in our buildings currently.
Thank you. Any other rebuttals? Thank you. Our next question comes from the Chamber of Commerce. We'll begin with Mr. Sullivan.
We know that more than 2/3 of the new jobs created between now and 2018 are in the high-growth job areas, and in demand will be requiring education that's beyond high school. How will you ensure, or how does the school district ensure that all students understand both the education and job skills needed for their future?
Perhaps you're referring to the 500,000 jobs nationwide that go unfulfilled because of lack of education, or perhaps you're talking about the 250 jobs right here in Rochester that go unfilled because of lack of education. I think it's the responsibility of the school board and the school district to give the kids the tools necessary for them to achieve a job. And if it means we need to restructure so that they can have the skills to not necessarily go on to vocational school, but to go directly into some of those jobs, and when needed, go to vocational skills with the background necessary to where they can achieve their job with the least amount of problems for them.
Thank you, Ms. Seeliger.
I think when we're talking about job skills and career readiness, this is a great place for our school district to look to our community partners. We know that the Chamber has different initiatives with their Learn to Earn, their STEM Summit, their Educators in the Workforce Institute, but we also know that we have other great partners here as well who are helping give our kids real-world experience and real-world skills. We have the Inside Out program at Lincoln with the Mayo. With the Mayo Clinic, we have the STEM Society at Century, we have the Gateway Science Fair. So we have these ways of bringing professionals in our community into contact with our students that will help them with their career and college readiness.
Thank you, Mr. Gallus.
Part of our issue that we're facing that will address some of that question is we've been in a budget shortfall for how many years and had to cut some of those quote-unquote career skills from our district. And there is no long-term future of bringing many of those things back. Part of I think also which would help us in that aspect is to define a set of criteria for the district and the educational programs that we offer, along with a defined set of expectations of student behavior. I just think about when I went to school, you knew what you couldn't do, and you knew what was expected. And that set some of those personal aspects that made you a better person, so that when you went out into the world, you treated everybody with the exact same respect. And I think that comes across when you set a consistent level of expectation across the board for everybody, students, staff, administrators.
Thank you. Are there any rebuttals? The next question from the league. What role do you believe the school board should have in selecting curriculum? And Mr. Gallus.
Actually, none, because that is what we hired the superintendent and his staff to do. The one role of the school board is to approve the budget for any program that it is required of. It's required to. But if I don't know what that program is, how it's going to be measured, and how we are going to make adjustments, then how can I approve an expenditure? It is the board's responsibility to ensure that we have actionable and measurable goals for any program that we put in place. Otherwise, we have no measurement to know if the program is successful or it's just not working. And if it's not working, what do we need to look at to make it better and to make it work for every student in the district.
Ms. Seeger?
I agree with Mr. Gallus that the school board has no role in selecting curriculum. I also believe that the school board is, setting the vision for high student achievement, and to that end, when those discussions of curriculum come up, we need to assure that those curriculums that we're offering are meeting the goals that we've set out.
Thank you. Our next question comes from the Post Bulletin, and we'll begin with Ms. Seeger.
Can I answer it?
I'm sorry. Oh, I didn't even put a check mark. I'm so sorry. It happens once in every forum. Ms.
I
Hall?
couldn't disagree more with what the previous candidates have mentioned. I think it's a prime responsibility of the school board to receive input from the community, and they're the best place to receive that input, and then evaluate the cost, which is also very critical, to decide what direction that the school board the school system is going to take. It's not the superintendent's responsibility to set the direction. It's the school board's responsibility with input from the community.
Thank you. Are there any rebuttals? Well then we will go on to a question from the Post Bulletin, and we will begin with Ms. Seeger.
Nearly 1,500 students go to schools outside the Rochester School District or go to charter schools. The parents choose to send their children to places they actively choose not to send their children to. Rochester, depriving the district millions of dollars of revenue each year. How would you arrest that flow and actually perhaps try to reverse it?
I think we need to do a better job of finding why those students are not coming to our district. I can count on, I have 5 friends whose children are not in the Rochester School District, and it's for 5 very different reasons, and they're in 5 very different places. I don't know that, we can say at this point that there's a definitive thing that we're missing, and that's why we're losing those students. But I do think it is our responsibility to see if there is an answer and what we can do about that. I think programming does lend itself to a possible solution. If we have something that no one else is offering, we could certainly use that as leverage to get some students back. And there's been certainly lots of ideas discussed throughout the years.
Thank you, Mr. Gallus.
Well, if you look at the district numbers and the projections, and I've been attending school board meetings for the last 4 years, and every year we make a projection, it's up. It's up by that much, but it's up. We're losing kids in the high school, not the lower grades. We're actually seeing a huge influx in our elementary schools. I think part of what we face is left over from previous years of numerous budget cuts. We have had to remove programming from this district that many people found attractive. Until we can address the programs that we currently have in place with actionable and measurable goals to figure out what's working and what's not, and what programs we could bring back. That's just, we could also look at, one of the previous candidates also talked about all day, everyday kindergarten. It is a draw. Parents seem to love that. It's something we should consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
I don't think it takes an advanced degree to figure out that people are voting with their feet. And we should do more researches to find out more details, but I think it's obvious that they're not getting what they want. I have some theories as to what I believe that is. I don't think that they feel that they all want to go to college. Out of 40% of the people that go to college, only 20% graduate, and only 10% of those can find a job. To me, that's pretty obvious that people would like to be able to get a job and not have to continue on. Not everybody wants to go on to college. I've got a master's degree, my wife's got a master's degree, I've got a son with a master's degree. I think it's important, but it's also important to have people who can do the electrical work, do the welding and the plumbing, and I think that's one of the main reasons people are leaving.
Thank you. Are there any rebuttals? Okay, then our next question comes to the Chamber of Commerce, and we'll begin with Mr. Sullivan.
How would you build or I just read the way it is. How would you build and nurture partnerships between the school district, higher education institutions, and the business community?
Well, we need to listen to them. I think they all have got good things to tell us. For example, we know from conversations with our neighbor that right here, RCTC, that 25% of the people that graduate from high school have to go to remedial classes so that they can continue on with their math studies. So that's one example. As we've expressed earlier about the 250 vacancies in jobs that nobody being given the skills to occupy. So plus we can use the community to create an interest in the jobs, or at least the knowledge of the jobs that the community wants. I mean, I think they go hand in hand, the educational community, the business environment, and the future teaching. We need to communicate to all of them.
Thank you, Mr. Gales.
Fascinating question. You must have read the new strategic plan, or at least the draft of it. Part of the strategic plan, we as a group of 29 came together, and that is one of our key areas of focus. It will be interesting to see what the measurement teams come back with to say how we as an organization, District 535, and a community can leverage the skills that we each have. I'm trying to think of the word, what we all bring to the table and how we can move everybody forward. So I guess I'm very interested to see what the measurement teams comes back with that actually dovetails right into your question, because it is part of the focus of this district. We all felt that it was vitally important to leverage that partnership.
Thank you, Ms. Seeger.
It was interesting to me when I was at a state PTA meeting that we also talked about community partnerships on a statewide level. And they were talking, there was some from the cities area talking about Fortune 500 companies who had headquarters in Minnesota, and how could our schools make them partners, because as we pointed out, our schools are educating our children to get jobs, and we'd like them to stay in the economy in Minnesota. I think that we also need to, it's easy to say we want community partners, but we have to have something that's in it for them as well. And so we need to do some work around making sure that our partners are getting something from us as we're getting from them.
Thank you. Are there any rebuttals? We're going to move on to questions from the audience now. The first question concerns budgeting. We're going to begin with Ms. Seelinger. Given current economic conditions, for many of us live on a tight budget, how can the board make more efficient changes? And what is the district's minimum responsibility to our students? Is it worth additional financial investment?
One thing that I'm really intrigued about that's coming forward, as I talked with the superintendent a few weeks ago, is the formation of a group of citizens and district personnel to look at financial matters in the district. And it wouldn't be a budget cutting committee as we have seen in the past that I've served on, and others of you probably have served on, but it would be looking at how do we create efficiencies and save money through other ways. And it would be, from my understanding, it has not come before the board yet, but it would be an ongoing committee. I think something like that is going to not only give us good information, but I think can really show the community that we are indeed serious about our budget deficits and what we can do to stop them.
Mr. Sullivan?
One of the most important things we can teach our students is that we live in a real world. It's not make-believe, it's not hypothetical, it's real. And part of that real world is that we have to live within our budget, whatever it takes. Just like everybody here has to live within a budget or they get in deep trouble. And the same thing with the school board. There are many areas that I'm aware of that could be cut. For example, we don't need to be in the trash disposal business. We don't need to be in the ice clearing business. There's many areas, and more I have yet to identify, that where we could introduce those cuts. But the last place to cut is in the student classes and their welfare, because they should be the number one thing we're concerned about. not the ice removal.
Thank you, Mr. Gillis.
Well, for me, it goes back to how do we measure the program's success? If we don't have actionable and measurable goals for a particular program, how do we know it's successful? Should we keep spending that kind of funds on a program that does not work? We recently implemented a new reading program in the district that roughly costs $100,000 per school. It's not replacing a program, it's in addition to a program that we already spent $55,000 on. I question on whether or not that was such a wise choice, because what's the $100,000 going to buy us? Again, if we can define our programming and show actionable and measurable student progress, that's a program we should keep. If the program isn't successful, then maybe we should reconsider its value to the students and to the district.
Thank you. Do we have any rebuttals? All right, our next question from the audience has to do with choice schools, and we will begin with Mr. Gauss. Lincoln and Washington are the highest rated schools. What will you do to make the education opportunities available to those two schools, available to all district schools rather than the select few?
Well, it'd be great if we could make them all choice schools, but I don't think that's an option. There are a number of parents in the district who don't choose that particular program. I think what we can do is look at what they are doing, what has been successful in their teaching, their practices, their policies, and start rolling that out in other schools that aren't quite as successful.
Thank you. Ms. Seelinger?
My son attended Friedel Middle School, which is a choice middle school here. The waiting list, I think, in the last year he was there was over 100 students. We know that there's long lists at Washington and Lincoln as well. When this question comes up, as it often does, we are limited by how would we do that? What curriculum would we pick to roll out? We have a Montessori program. We have a 45-15 program. You know, there's success in each of those programs, but as a choice program, there's no way to implement them in a larger scale at this point. Also, having served on the attendance boundary committee, we know that if we take an existing building and make it a choice school, then we're displacing the students at their neighborhood school. So it's quite a complex issue. I think that it needs some further looking at in terms of what they're doing successfully. I don't believe that we'll see a time when we'll be recreating either of those schools.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
One of the trademarks of our society is competition. Since we have choice schools, and it's obvious that there's a lot of people that want to go to those choice schools, it's not a deep thinking project for me to understand that they're doing something right. We need to try to increase the program. Whatever they're doing, we need to try to carry on to other schools, and we need to provide the customers, which are the parents, what they're asking for.
Thank you. Do you have any rebuttals? The next question is about Golden Hill. It was an elementary school when I went in the 6th grade. We'll begin with Ms. Seelinger. The question is, how do you plan to deal with the problems with the Golden Hill building? Would you be willing to come to Golden Hill's open house this Thursday from 5:30 to 6:30?
Yes, I would. I'll put it on my calendar. I actually attended the event they had that was the evening event that celebrated some of their new gardening programming. I have been in Golden Hills. I was at Golden Hill when my son was in pair classes, so that was about 10, 12 years ago. And it was old then. You know, I think it is a unique program. Talking to some of the students about their gardening in particular was really fascinating. They were really engaged in that, in their garden. I think this is definitely a problem that we need to solve. It's on the top of the list of the facilities task force. And so I am hopeful that we will see a better facility for those students.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
We will continuously have problems like this where we have outdated facilities that either need to be replaced or fixed. And I don't have the engineering expertise to tell you which should be done. This is something we have to rely on outside people coming in and telling us as a board. And so it's up to the board to make that decision. And to be honest with you, I think that decision will be made before we get there.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
I'll agree with both of my colleagues. Yes, I am for replacing Golden Hills. I think the board has already come up with a plan that makes it, tax neutral to the district so far. Actually, that's maybe changing, who knows, in the next coming board meeting with everything that's tied to that. It's old. It's going to cost us more to renovate it than it would be to tear it down and build a new one, which in the long term saves us all a lot of money and a lot of headache. So, and yes, I would love to be there on Friday.
Thank you. Are there any rebuttals? Our next audience question will begin with Mr. Gallus. This is regarding legislative funding. What will you do to work on increasing per pupil funding for the Rochester School District, and are there other changes you would work for at the legislature?
The per pupil funding is based upon our tax base, in part. Rochester has an interesting tax base. We have a rather large employer who's a nonprofit that does affect part of our pupil funding. Thank God they're here, but it does play into the equation. And I think because we have such a unique situation here in Rochester, I would love to see the board, our board, along with other board members across southeastern Minnesota, come together and go up to our state legislators and say, hey guys, we have some issues and we need your help. It just so happens that two of our legislators used to be school board members. That's fascinating. So I think we should be able to bend an ear, and potentially a third one might become one of our legislators. So I think we as a board need to be more proactive at a state level with our legislators, because I don't think they get it. It's quite clear they don't get it.
Thank you. Mr. Solomon?
It's a very complicated question to try to answer in 1 minute, but I will give you what I can. We have very good legislators right now that are trying their best to do for us what they can. There's a lot of misconceptions that are going on between the different opposing parties, and it's not easy to distinguish what's true from fiction. My general philosophy is the less we have to deal with the national and the state level and contain it within the local level, the better off we are. Every time we get a mandate, or every time we get money from one of those, there's mandates that come with it, and often those mandates cost more money than what we get. So we need to be very careful about that and try to work with our legislatures to keep that to a minimum.
Ms. Seeliger?
I agree that we need to make strong efforts to work with our legislators on per pupil increase in funding, looking at some of the other things that affect how we can spend our money, whether that's the maintenance of effort and how many social workers we need to have in our buildings, the percentage of staff development money we have to set aside. I think there's a lot of ways to open a dialogue and a conversation, and I think we're in a great position to do that.
Do you have any rebuttals? Our next audience question has to do with closing the achievement gap. How has our district been doing in efforts to close the achievement gap? What current efforts should be continued or discontinued? And what new initiatives should be brought forward? Is there one age group that is most important, K through 4, 5 through 8, 9 through 12? We're going to begin with Mr. Sullivan.
I'm more interested in seeing that all students receive the education that they each need for themselves. It's going to be different across the board. I don't think that taking statistics and not considering what the interests of the students are is going to be very productive for us. I think part of our problem is that we have all apples. We need some oranges in the mix. Right now we're pushing everybody towards college, and not everybody wants to go to college. If they don't want to go to college, what's their options? They can drop out of school, they can do poorly on their tests, and I think that's a reflection of what the problem truly is, not the achievement gap itself, but what generates the achievement gap.
There's been a lot of different initiatives to try and close the achievement gap. Some of the things that we know that are purported to work cost a lot of money. They seem simple, like a longer school day or a longer school year, but we know that that is a cultural change that would have to be made in our district to keep our students in their seats a longer time. I think we have to look at programming things as they come to see if they're making strides in what we want them to do, but we have to look at other things as well that perhaps aren't programming or curricular.
Thank you, Mr. Gallus.
I don't know that we'll ever close the achievement gap. Some students are just not engaged. There are certain things that we could do to try and engage them, possibly. So I don't think we're ever going to actually truly remove the gap. We will work very hard to try to help those students who fall in that gap. But I guess I think back to, where is our gap in Rochester? We've heard one thing from one person in the cabinet, we've heard this from the other cabinet. It goes back to, let's look at the data. Where does our true gap exist, and where do we need to focus our energies? What programs do we currently have in place that we are spending a considerable amount of funding on that supposedly addresses the gap? We have no measurements to say that it is or it isn't. The waiver that Minnesota has accepted also kind of throws a wrinkle in that, because for the next 2 years, kind of all the measurement systems are up in the air. So it'll be interesting to see where this all settles out, but I think it'll be interesting in the next few years.
Thank you. Do we have any rebuttals? Our next question has to do with the role and involvement of parents and students in education. What do you view as that role? What is the role of children in providing input on district policy and curriculum, or parents' role, and how would you seek their input? And we'll begin with Mr. Solomon.
Well, obviously, the parent has the primary role of education. We have 1,500 students that have left our system because the parents are involved. We have another 150 students, and by the way, that's 30 teachers that have left our system, and another 5 expected to leave our system because the parents are involved. So I don't agree with this idea that parents aren't as involved as they should be. Some are not, and we need to account for that. But we also need to understand that the parents are our bosses. And we need to listen to them. And we need to take their direction. And if we do that, I think all these problems will eventually be solved.
Thank you. Mr. Gallus?
The students and the parents are the stakeholders. I think the board, and in particular the superintendent, has done an excellent job opening up those lines of communications with the public and the students. I think we need to foster that. I think we as board members need to be out in the schools on somewhat of a regular basis, talking to the students, talking to the staff. The board currently has I can't think of the term now, but they basically have a school board meeting, what is it called?
Student school board.
Say it.
Student school board.
Student school board, thank you, Deb. So they are receiving input today from students from across the district. I think we can expand that at a bunch of different levels. The other thing I encourage every single parent and community member to do is contact your board members. I have. They're pretty nice to talk to, actually. They're pretty friendly. I also think that if you really want to know what's going on in the district, go to a school board meeting. Fascinating. Been doing it for 4 years. You'd love it.
Ms. Senior?
When my son was in the 5th grade, he's now going into 9th, they asked him at the end of the year what they wanted to be when they grew up, or what did they want to do. And he said he wanted to reform the educational system. Where he gets it, I don't know. So I do believe students do have a voice and important things to say about their education. As my role as Area Council PTSA president, I also know that parents have an important role in our schools. We know at PTA that when parents are involved in the school buildings, not only do their own students benefit, but all students benefit. If you're involved in your child's education, attendance is better, grades are better, drug use is down. The list goes on and on. So part of my work as on PTA, of course, is to encourage all parents to get involved in a variety of ways.
Anyone else? Okay, bullying. What is your opinion regarding the district's bullying policy? Does it need to be strengthened, revoked, or remain the same? And why? And we'll begin with Mr. Gallus.
The policy manual for the district is over 700 and some odd pages. We have a decent bullying policy today. I know the superintendent has talked to a couple of students, and they are actually working on addressing the shortcomings of the current policy. I'm hoping within the next couple of weeks to find out whether or not the superintendent has set up a meeting to kind of finalize a draft of what they would like to present to the board. So I think we understand that there are shortfalls. I believe that the superintendent has addressed that with some of the student body to say, hey, we need your help. And I think that's commendable.
Thank you, Ms. Steenberg.
Last night I was at the post-bulletin dialogue on the social emotional impacts of bullying long-term. What I took away from that was several things, obviously quite a bit. We don't have to be in this alone. I think it goes back to our community partners, the Diversity Council, public health nurses, larger community members. When I spoke to the superintendent last year about bullying, and the area council presented a program on, we brought in a speaker for parents and children, I said, you know, we can really be your partner here. Area council took that on as an issue last year. It's certainly been discussed at statewide PTA. So I think that obviously we're going to see more as the governor's task force rolls out their final recommendation next week, I believe. And I'm hoping that we see more consistency on bullying policy in our district, more focus on not only the victims, but the bullies as well.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan.
When I was in high school, I weighed 145 pounds, wore glasses, and was pimple-faced. I can say honestly that I've had my share of bullying. Since then, I've personally stopped 2 rapes, 1 burglary, 1 race riot, and walked into a situation where the police refused to come, involving probably 1,000 people. And I solved all those problems. I think as part of bullying, we need to let everybody know that as long as you allow the bullies to get away with it and you don't stand up to them, they're going to continue, and no policy is going to change that. We need to educate our people that they have to stand up to bullying no matter what the consequences might be.
Thank you. Are there any rebuttals? Question regarding your priority. What will be, we're going to begin with Mr. Sullivan, what will be your top priority as a school board member?
My top priority would be to change the way that we educate people who are not intending to go to college. We do a great job on putting people that are interested in college, putting them through the program and giving them an excellent shot, well, except for 25% of them. But we have a far greater number of students that have no direction, they don't know what to do, they end up dropping out, they end up not having good grades because they're not giving any direction. My priority would be to try to give those students direction. There is nothing wrong with being a welder. There's nothing wrong with taking shop. There's nothing wrong with working on their car. And if any of you have any doubts about it, try go through life without those things being done for you by others. So that would be my top priority.
Thank you, Mr. Gallus.
First priority would be setting some defined, actionable, and measurable goals for the district education program. Again, it comes back to, we don't know what's working, we don't know what's not working. If we can get rid of the things that aren't working and look at taking those resources and bring programming back into the district that achieves an educational goal for a student that wasn't engaged before, I think that's important. I think that's twofold. It will bring more students back into the district. We provide a better rounded educational opportunity. And I think the superintendent would love to look at that, because I think it's a focus item of his as well.
Thank you. Ms. Seelinger?
One priority I have is to continue our work with our community partners. Not only do we know that they can help our students become college and career ready, we know that the things that they could offer our district can help us with some of our funding shortfalls. The backdrop of that, of course, my priority is always clear and open and consistent communication, and I think that there's always room for improvement there.
Thank you. That ends the questions portion of our forum tonight. We will continue with closing statements by the candidates, and you will go in this order. Ms. Seelinger will go first, Mr. Gallus second, and Mr. Sullivan third.
Well, thank you for your time and your attention this evening. Thank you to the League of Women Voters, Rochester Post-Bulletin Chamber of Commerce, RCTC, Our Neighbors, and Area Council PTSA. My motivation to run for the Rochester Public School Board goes beyond the fact that I have 2 children in the district and I'm invested in their education. I have seen firsthand the best this district has to offer. I am continually impressed by the dedication of our teachers, who have given just a little and sometimes a lot more to benefit our kids. I'm humbled by our students who overcome challenges today that were unheard of when I was growing up. I'm proud to work with the parents who show up to shelve books, chaperone field trips, and work with our students one-on-one. Their actions have inspired me to do more and to work harder for all the students in our district. I believe I have the right skills and the right experience to offer the Rochester Public School Board, and I humbly ask for your vote on August 14th.
Thank you. Mr. Gallus?
In closing, I'd like to leave you with a couple of thoughts. There are 3 pivotal roles of a school board member: budget management, policy, and the hiring of a superintendent. I believe because a candidate or a school board member asks tough questions does not mean that they're trying to micromanage the district or that they're trying to be negative. We are first and foremost elected officials, and our community entrusts us to do what is right, both financially and educationally, when it comes to this district and to the students. We need to change the mindset of the district leadership at all levels to keep looking at how to cost effectively manage the budget and what educational programs best meet the needs of all students in our communities. I would like to thank all of you for coming out tonight. And I would also ask, as I do with everybody I talk to, ask for your vote on August 14th. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
I'm going to close discussing the mission statement set up by our school board and administrator. I think it's nonsense. If you want to be a UN employee, I think it's great. If you want to be Miss Universe, I think it's great. If you want to be a politically correct whatever, I think it's great. But it's nonsense. It's not what we need for our district. We need something that's simple, easy to understand, and applicable to all. I will give you a short mission statement, not to say this is what it should be, but it should be along this line, just as an example. All students acquire the tools necessary to reach their goals in any path they choose. It's simple, short, and it's understandable. That's the direction we need for our school board. Something simple, easy to understand, and applicable to all.
Thank you. Candidates. I would like to thank each of the candidates for participating in tonight's forum. Thank you for your service to the community and for your willingness to participate in the democratic process by running for office. I would like to remind you that the views expressed in the forums tonight were those of the candidates, not the League of Women Voters Rochester or any partner or sponsor in the forum. Thank you all for coming tonight. Thanks to our partners, the Rochester Chamber of Commerce, the Rochester Post-Bulletin, the Rochester Public Library, and RCTC. Our supporting sponsors are Our Neighbors, the Rochester Area Council PTSA, and Rochester Community Education. Remember that primary election day is August 14th. I'd like to remind you all that absentee voting in Olmsted County has been moved to the Olmsted County Fairgrounds. It's at the corner of 15th Street and 3rd Avenue Southeast. The address is 1421 3rd Avenue Southeast. Don't forget to vote. If you have a question regarding your polling place, visit the Secretary of State website at www.sos.state.mn.us.